Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planalytics TerraMetrics Agriculture Mid-Season Weather Review and Outlook and Crop Yield Update. I'm Jeff Doran, Planalytics Director Specialized Support and Services, and very pleased to be joined by my colleague out of TerraMetrics, Dr. Jude Castens. Jude, it is great to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to join you in this in this review.
Real appreciate it. We're really super excited about this. So before we get started, just a few things logistic wise. So we are not taking live questions today, but if you do have a question that you would like to pose to us that we can answer at a later date, please chat them. Please put them into the chat box, which should be available there in the profile. So, and we also will be recording this as well. So once the event is over, we will make that recording available to whoever would like to. So again, look for an email on that post-event. But again, glad to be with you here today. So this is what we'll cover on our mid-season weather and U.S. crop yield update. So I'll get things started basically looking back at the conditions that have affected this season's crops. Actually go back to talk about the winter wheat planting last fall and really bringing you up to date with all things weather in terms of its impact on crops. And then get you now to current with the mid-season assessment insights, talk a little bit about where we are with drought and flooding. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jude, who's going to talk a lot more about the current crop conditions, yield potential. Again, we've been partnering with TerraMetrics for the last 20 years, and they are one of the industry leaders in terms of what they're doing with crop yield and crop condition mapping and analytics. So I'll be pleased to turn that over to him for that assessment. And then I will kind of build the story from a weather perspective on where we think we're going to be going, talking about the major weather factors, some of the wild cards we'll be looking at, and then provide you a long-range weather outlook. So a lot to get to, so let's get started. In terms of kind of where we've been from an agriculture perspective with season's weather, we go back to actually the winter wheat planting last fall, and it was exceptionally challenging. Particularly in the plains, overly dry soils, had a lot of drought at that particular time, a lot of struggles with early development. But have to say that really since we've turned the corner into the late winter and the spring, the pattern has really supported a lot of very good moisture events that have really been very frequent and kind of unusual in areas that are typically fairly dry. And then the yield potential looks good. I don't want to steal any of Jude's thunder because I know he's going to talk a lot about the yield potential, but overall pretty bullish based on the plains, but we do have some issues in the Pacific Northwest that he'll talk about. In terms of the spring planting season, look, it went fairly smoothly for most. We didn't have any real late season Arctic outbreaks. The one thing that we did have at times was exceptionally wet conditions, particularly from the eastern plains through parts of the mid-south. It did force replant in some of those wettest spots. And we did have some cooler readings across the northern plains. We got things started a little bit later. But overall, the planting season went fairly well. And as we look at really the weather for this season, it seems like at mid-season, we've always had some sort of issues from a weather perspective, but frankly, the weather has been very, very cooperative for anywhere east of the Rockies. We haven't had these periods of prolonged heat stress. And with that, we've had very timely and very frequent rain events and have really kept soils well-watered, soils, subsoils. If you look at the drought maps over the last several weeks, in many areas where long-term drought had settled in for a long time, it's been completely eliminated. We'll show you some evidence of that. We're still dealing with some heat units running a little bit behind across some of the northern states, particularly given some of the cooler trends we had earlier in the season. But things are starting to catch up. And one of the big takeaways from this season, while we've had plenty of moisture events, that has often come with severe storms. Large hail, tornadoes, high winds. We've had a lot of those episodes this season. In fact, it's been the most active season for severe weather since 2011, and certainly in those areas hardest hit, there's been plenty of replant as well. So here we are mid-season. as we kind of look broader, and I'll talk a bit more about some of the major factors that we'll be looking at that kind of influence the weather patterns. But right now, it's all about ENSO neutral conditions. And again, ENSO is that trend that we see in the equatorial Pacific that gives us an idea, generally speaking, of what the downstream pattern will look like over the U.S. So ENSO neutral is going to continue through the rest of the growing season, the harvest season. Beyond that, things will become a little bit more uncertain, but at least for the remainder of the season, ENSO neutral conditions will be in place. That generally means we'll having to be looking at some other factors that will be at play, and we'll talk about that in a bit. In terms of where we are over June into early July, again, it was a month of fairly moderate temperatures, particularly for interior sections of the plains and the Corn Belt. Averages were generally near to cooler than typical, and the above normal readings were generally due to elevated minimum temperatures, not maximum temperatures, which tend to put the most stress on the crops. And that's really given the fact that we've had a lot of clouds, a lot of rain from these storms. Again, it's been a season of frequent moisture, and that has been great news, particularly for those areas of the Corn Belt that have really been coming into the season fairly dry. And so a lot of these areas are now completely drought free. Summer crops, everything's reported healthy. The USDA NASS crop progress reports, everything looking really good, very healthy. We have had some flooding, and certainly that has been in the news of late, and I'll show you some areas of concern which have continued here into the early part of July. We're also watching what we call the Southwest monsoon. That's a yearly surge of moisture that tends to flow out of Mexico into the Southwest. It's been bringing some good storms to some areas that have been very dry across that region. We talked about severe storm episodes, which have continued here into the mid-season. And we're also looking at the tropical season as well. So if we're looking at the Atlantic, it's been a quiet start to the season. Again, season starts officially on June 1st. We've only had 3 named Atlantic storms, with Chantal being the only landfalling one that happened over the July 4th holiday weekend in the Carolinas. We are watching right now a disturbance that is going to be moving into the Gulf of Mexico. So that will be something for us to watch pretty closely in the days ahead. I mentioned before that we're in a very good situation in terms of drought. This is looking at the drought monitor. This is the latest one available, but frankly, we are in a really good situation for just about everywhere east of the Rockies. We're completely drought free, and that's almost unheard of when you look back through history, and certainly recent years, where we've had some level of significant drought in the heart of summer. It feels very unusual to be in this kind of a situation, but certainly one that producers are very happy with. Now, on the other end, what has been in the news of late is the impact of this excessive moisture. So on the left-hand side is we call the current stream flow. And so where you see those black and blue dots really represent those areas with very high rivers and streams. They're along the East Coast where it's been exceptionally wet. It's just been so humid, and any disturbance has really taken itself to rain out, right? Because the atmosphere has been so saturated. And we've seen that over the East Coast over the last several weeks, but certainly the bigger story is down there in the hill country of Texas, where we know that over the 4th of July, they had that devastating flooding. And then unfortunately, we had another event here this past weekend, which really added insult to injury. So we know that's a difficult situation there, and certainly something from an agricultural impact standpoint has led to replant at times. Okay, so that kind of brings us up to speed, kind of where we are now with all things weather, but I want to turn it over to my esteemed cohort, Dr. Jude Castens, to provide an idea of what TerraMetrics is providing and his insights on crop condition and the yield potential for some of the major crops. So Jude?
All right, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, and we're just going to continue that theme of pretty good weather across the main growing areas east of the Rockies that Jeff was talking about weather-wise. It's good to begin with the satellite greenness. So we're looking here at what's called the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index map. NDVI is one of our I'd say our most widely used satellite-based indicators of vegetative health, and we've got a long record of these data. And what that does is gives us a chance to do in-season comparisons. Look at a recent change and past change, and so here we see the current greenness map, or at least the one from last week. We're in the process of updating it this week's map, and we see the standard pattern of where there's more rain, we tend to see more green, and the corn belt in the Midwest is very much at peak vegetation right now across a lot of the area, and so it's taking on those deep dark green shades. Now, if we look at what's happened recently, and so in the upper right, you'll see the change map. So this would have been versus 2 weeks ago. We see that a lot of increased greenness shown by the green pixels in the northern parts of the corn belt there, north of in northern Iowa and Minnesota, say, and even up in toward the Red River Valley near the Canadian border. This is a reflection of pretty good growing conditions. There's been enough moisture up there and enough heat to keep the crops moving right along. By contrast, if we go to the east toward those yellowing regions, we can see there just east of the Rockies in eastern Colorado, a lot of that is wheat that is finishing up right now. It's in pretty good shape, but this is just normally what it does about this time of year. But then when we move up to the Washington, Oregon, Idaho area, that wheat is also finishing up, but a lot of that has been driven by some serious recent dryness, and so that wheat is finishing under pretty stressful conditions. That can be seen in the map below, where we look at the difference from average, and once again we see a whole lot of green all the way from New Mexico, over to Ohio and across the south. Pretty much all of that driven by enough sunshine between rain events to keep the vegetation moving. By contrast, when we get up to Montana and then over back to the Pacific Northwest again, we see more of that worse than average condition. Again, a reflection of more difficult growing conditions this season. So next slide, please. So we're gonna touch briefly on our three main crops here, and beginning with winter wheat. Now winter wheat is about 2/3 of the national crop is harvested already, and pretty much everything from Kansas southward, where about 1/3 of the crop is grown, has already been cut out this year. And we issued our final forecast of the growing season, but which is based a lot on that NDVI we were just looking at, along with other information. We issued our final forecast here about 2 weeks ago. And where we landed here, if you look into the table there, is about at a 54 bushel per acre average, which is very good. Not quite the record, but pretty close. But also right in line with what the USDA is saying. In June they were just under 54, and then their July estimate hopped just over 54 here, released last week. So we're in pretty good agreement with them overall. Kansas, sitting at about at just over 50 bushels per acre, is experiencing a very good crop. Washington, which is the #2 wheat producer, we're not as optimistic as USDA. I think some of their numbers in the Pacific Northwest are conservative yet at this point, since not much harvest activity has taken place there. And so those numbers we could see tip back a little bit from the USDA as the season wears on. So next slide, please. So jumping over to the corn crop, which is in peak season right now, we see a crop that's got a lot of high yield potential and a lot of acres and a lot of production potential between those two things. So if we look at the district map there first on the left, and the numbers on top are the state level yield estimates, we see the usual suspects there of in the heart of the Corn Belt of Iowa and Illinois, breaking 200, which seems almost a regular event these days. There's a little concern with Illinois with some recent drying soils. Crop reports are generally still good there, and the forecast is looking a little wetter again, so those concerns could be short-lived. Looking at our final yield is interesting to see that we're at 182. Now, last year was what, 179.7. So we have never broken 180 bushels per acre as a nation, but we think we're on pretty good track to do that this year. One wild card that you don't see on this list is that a lot of corn in the south, which accounts for about 6 to 8% of the national crop, is already in fairly late stages of reproduction and is in a lot better health than it was last year at this time. And last year was kind of a drag on the national crop. This year it might be a little bit of a bump, but we'll see where the weather goes down there as the corn finishes grain filling. Next slide, please. And a similar story with soybeans. So soybeans are grown very heavily also in the Midwest, but also have a stronger presence than corn down south, like in the Delta region, where the crop is really moving right along. By and large, the soy conditions are very good across almost all of the top producers, and a lot of that is driven by we're really in pretty good moisture situation as we're approach the back half of July here, which is often when we can see some of that dryness stress. Now soybeans, as some of you may know, are a very resilient crop. They usually in most places finish later than corn, and August is often their key weather month. So everything, all the arrows heading into August seem to be aligning in the right direction at the moment, and we'll just have to see what holds when here in a few weeks. And I think Jeff will be getting into some longer range projections here on the weather in just a second. But other than that, again, everything is sort of trending for I'd say a trend or better yields for the nation's corn and soybean crops, and we've already got, I would say, that pretty well locked in for the nation's winter wheat crop. So, all right. The last thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit different perspective. So we bring in NDVI to our forecast, but we also factor in other information. And one of the key pieces there is the weekly issued USDA crop condition ratings for the key producing states. And so what we're looking at here is this week. So just on Monday here this week, the USDA released the latest crop condition reports, and we have now 40 years of these data going back to the 80s, which give us the chance to put the current numbers in a historical perspective. And what we see is also supportive of a pretty optimistic crop potential for both corn and soybeans. So the numbers you see on these maps indicate their ranking 1 through 40 as far as from worst to best in the historical sense. And for instance, you'll notice then in the Iowa and Missouri in the corn panel on the left are historically good, along with North Carolina and Pennsylvania as well, and some other of those greenish tinted states are looking good at the moment as well. They're in a gray color, tend to be sort of middle of the road, but that's usually a good sign when it comes to potential. What you don't like to see is a lot of really low category crops. Now, things like Michigan up north and North Dakota, there is still time for those crop conditions to rebound, and it's early enough in the season. These indicators are still going to have the chance to move around a little bit more. Interesting though, is we see the same kind of pattern when we switch over to soybeans, as far as those two states being somewhat singled out for conditions right at the moment. Meanwhile, with soybeans, North Carolina is also really thriving, as is its neighbor to the south, South Carolina, and then the column of states along the Mississippi River, where things are just going really well right now. And I think, Jeff, I am finished with what I have to say.
Okay, well, Jude, a lot of great information here, and I just want to tout these particular maps here because these are TerraMetrics created maps. Jude and his team have taken that data from USDA, and they've created these custom maps that are actually put into the bi-weekly or every other 2 weekly reports, bi-monthly, I should say, every 2 weeks that go into those yield reports. And again, the update will be later this week. But again, so he showed you winter wheat, corn, soybeans. He did not say that they also do 6 other summer crops in terms of these bi-monthly or every 2-week yield projections. So a lot of great work coming out of Jude and his team there, and this certainly provides a pretty excellent snapshot perspective on the state of the crop.
And Jeff, I'd just like to interject one more thing. Yeah, so we have another. The yields we were just looking at were issued the first week of July. We have another forecast update underway this week, and then in late July, then we'll actually take our forecasts even down to the county level spatial scale. So those become available for the last several periods of the growing season. Now that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jude. Great stuff. Okay, I want to start talking about kind of where we're heading from a weather perspective. So I want to build the story a little bit, knowing most of you are just kind of laymen in terms of weather, but I want to bring some unique perspectives and insights, and that starts with us in the oceans. What you're looking at here is an animated sea surface temperature anomaly map. That's basically showing you the differences from normal in these sea surface temperatures. You can see them animated here. The blue shadings represent cooler than typical. The red and orange shadings represent warmer than typical. And I've highlighted in that box the ENSO region in the equatorial Pacific. And you can see that there's not really a lot of either dark yellow shading or dark blue shading. And again, that is representative of this idea of an ENSO neutral phase. But if you look closer to the US, you see some interesting disparities here. A plume of cooler water extending up toward the southwest US. This has been helpful in kind of animating the southwest monsoon circulation, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then that area of very warm water that's been building up over the northwest, the Gulf of Alaska, that's really been responsible for a lot of predominant high pressure that's settled in over the western US. We've been hearing about a lot of Canadian wildfires as a result. The other thing before we leave this chart is I want to show you that as we progress through this imagery, how much warmer the water in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico is getting. And as you know, this is what we need to promote a lot of this hurricane activity. Again, right now, we've been limited to very little activity because of the dust that has come off the Saharan desert. But as that dust layer starts to subside, we've got the ingredients for a very active season. So let's talk about some of those other factors. Again, I mentioned that we're in ENSO neutral conditions. So when we have that situation, we're looking at other things that we know can tend to drive the weather. So I want to talk about these things briefly. So something called the Madden-Julian oscillation, or we call the MJO, it's really a measure of tropical forcing around the globe. It's something that we look at very closely when we're projecting hurricane activity, but certainly we know that it promotes its own downstream impacts. So there are certain phases that we look at. You can see 8, 1, 2, and 3 that actually contribute to enhanced drought in the plains and Midwest, where conversely in those other phases, 1 through 8, so 4 through 7, tend to allow more jet stream energy into the western US. So the bottom line is, we know, looking at the MJO and the trends, that this can produce certain types of weather across the country. Certainly, we know that now we're in the heart of summer. We always set up this subtropical high pressure ridge, and it really just, depending on where that ridging sets up, will really determine, who gets in the path of storms that are steered around the high pressure versus those that are under that high pressure ridge. And that would, those areas are the epicenter for prolonged dryness. So we're always kind of tracking where that high pressure ridge is. And look, it can vary. It's generally semi-permanent, but it can vary from week to week. So it's something we look at very closely. Already talked about the monsoon, calling it the North American monsoon here, but it really is a flow out of Mexico, an enhanced moisture flow every year that happens, otherwise known as the Southwest monsoon. We actually activated a little bit earlier than typical in the mid part of June, but really for the next several weeks, we expect that to continue. So we have seen some relief across parts of the eastern parts of the Southwest. So I think Jude showed some positive greenness across parts of New Mexico, and points to the north and east. So we'll continue to watch some relief potentially as that monsoon kind of activates over the next several weeks. We've already talked about severe storms, severe convective storms. It's been great that they provided all this boost in moisture. We've completely eliminated the drought, but it also increases the risk of hail and wind. And I'll show you the actual outlook, but as in this part of the season, we're looking more at kind of the northern plains, the upper Midwest as being the primary epicenters for severe weather as we head out of July and into August. And then finally, I already mentioned hurricane season. Slow start, but the peak isn't until August anyway. So, certainly it only takes one storm to change the fortunes of producers, either positive or negative. And it's certainly something that we continue to track. We actually have a service that I'll talk about at the very end that projects hurricane activity. Okay, so let's build the story now in terms of the actual forecast. So this is looking at our 7-day temperature outlook, minimum temperature on the left, maximum temperature on the right. And this has kind of been the predominant pattern where the minimum temperatures have been more elevated versus normal, as you can see in the yellow and orange shadings, but generally not excessive, in upper 60s to mid to maybe upper 70s, which we'll experience over the Corn Belt and points east. But the maximum temperatures have been very comfortable. Again, looking at the next 7 days, it's actually going to get unusually cool for this time of year. We're tracking a weather system that's going to be dragging down some pretty cool air. So you can see some low 70s starting to come down into parts of the northern plains, and really not much more than the low to mid 80s. Now, I will tell you this will come with some higher humidity levels, but in terms of the actual temperatures themselves, they're not going to be terribly high. But things, they are a-changing, as they say. This is looking at the 8 to 14 day period. So this is looking at next week, and really this takes us to the end of July. The models, the meteorological models that we track are becoming more highly confident about what could be the first real extended heat wave that we're seeing this season. And frankly, it's amazing that we haven't seen anything like this prior. But we're looking at a scenario where the high pressure that I talked about looks to shift right over the plains. And as a result, we're bringing in a lot of dry air as well. So we're going to be talking about low temperatures in the upper 70s to maybe approaching the low 80s for some across the Corn Belt. But look at those high temperatures. Now we're in the kind of the mid to upper 90s. Definitely expect to see some 100s. And this is going to come with some pretty high humidity. So we could be looking at heat index readings pushing 110 or greater. So now, right now, it's suggesting that this will be a several day event. After that, it looks to wane a little bit, but certainly it's not well timed, particularly for those that still have corn silking to get through and some other key crop stages. Let's take a look at precipitation now. So for the first 7 days, the next 7 days looks pretty good. Again, I mentioned we're tracking a storm coming out of the northern plains. It's going to bring a really good bout of wet weather to much of the western Corn Belt, northern plains, and really across the entirety of the Corn Belt. So again, another good bout of moisture here. You can see that pulse of moisture from the southwest monsoon that's going to be working into that. And then actually, we've got a tropical disturbance that looks to be moving into the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to be moving across Florida over the next day or two. And then we'll have to see how that looks. There is a favorable environment for some strengthening. So that's kind of what the models are hinting at here across the deep south. So we'll continue to keep our eye on that. But as we go to days 8 and 14, as that high pressure starts to shift into the plains, we're going to shut the taps off. You can see pretty much across the plains, the Corn Belt, we're looking for a very, very dry week. Now, the great news is that for most of these areas, they do have good soil moisture reserves to tap into. So that's good. But again, we're going to be bringing some pretty strong heat and dry weather to these areas that will start to put a little bit more stress on the crop. And so that's a great segue into our corn stress risk product. This is an assessment of the next 2 weeks and what weather will bear. Again, this is a combination of what is the soil moisture situation, but also, what's the weather trends going to be like over the next 2 weeks? Again, the next week doesn't look too bad, but once we get into that week 2 period, we're actually looking at the possibility of some extreme risks. So, Jude, I'll turn to you to maybe get your thoughts on this. I mean, if we realize this, what are your thoughts in terms of, of the yield? I mean, you've been talking about a pretty bullish scenario, but if we get this heat to come in like this, what are your thoughts in terms of how that could kind of play out from a crop condition yield perspective?
Yeah, we've kind of got a gradient that goes from south to north when it comes to the corn crop right now, looking at this map. So everything there in that extreme risk zone, is either in the middle of silking or even further along as you head south. So there are definitely some concerns here of the timing. As you mentioned, the soil moisture thankfully is in good shape in most places to get it through. So really those folks up, the producers up in the north there, say in Kansas and Missouri are both top 10 states, that if there is too much of that dry heat right when silking happens, that can certainly lead to kind of some spotty pollination and take off some potential. The corn, like other crops, is that it's most sensitive right when it's in that pollination phase, and then afterward. I'm happy to see the nighttime lows are not getting exceptionally high because after corn pollinates and starts to grain fill, we start to hear about things like dark respiration, which happens with warm nighttime temperatures. Now, there's still time for that if that dome persists and maybe even gets exacerbates a little bit. But for now, there will be a bit of stress. It looks like. Based on that hot and dry conditions. The South also, other than that system you mentioned coming up into the Gulf, the South has been pretty dry here just recently, and it doesn't take too long for it to chew through its water reserves down there. Just moving north a little bit out of that risk zone, I think we kind of see the sweet spot is really sort of the heart of the corn, the middle tier of the Corn Belt region. As you go across from, say, Western Ohio to Indiana and to Northern Illinois and Iowa and Nebraska and so on, where things I think, if this line holds, will be all right. And what's not shown, say, in this map is those cooler temperatures up north, since we really don't view that as a risk, but that if the temperatures stay that way for a long time, we could start thinking about heat unit concerns, and will there be enough warm temperatures for the crops to finish properly way up as we get closer to the Canadian border. So yeah, there's your cross-sectional interpretation of this map.
No, that's great stuff, Jude, and I appreciate your bringing up the issue with the degree day deficits we're seeing up across the north. And what we learned from a client of ours here recently was that due to some of the severe storms that they've had up across the Dakotas and Minnesota area, there's actually been some recent replant, which felt a little bit shocking when we heard that. But if they're replanting soybeans at this point in time, we're going to have to get some pretty strong heat units on those crops to get them through before any kind of freeze. So again, that's just kind of interesting to point out. Again, talked about the fact that this has been a significant severe weather season. This is looking at the severe weather potential, just kind of low, medium, high chances over the next 4 weeks. Again, weeks 1 and 2 on the left, weeks 3 and 4 on the right. A lot of this is climatology, frankly. This is typically where storms set up at this time of the year. But again, storms can be pretty significant. I mean, this is the time of year typically where we can see these very big mesoscale convective complexes that can be very slow moving and put down several inches of rain. And also these derecho events, these high wind events. These storms that can move very, very rapidly with the flow. They can bring winds of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour over a very large area in a short period of time. So this is always the time of year when we're always looking for those types of things to communicate. Okay, so let's talk about the longer range outlook. And so again, we provide this information to our client base. We provide these monthly updates to them. So this is the latest we're looking at here. So just to orient you to what we're looking at, temperature on the left-hand side, precipitation on the right-hand side. What you're looking at is basically chances, the colorized shadings of chances to be above or below normal. So the model that we're using, the North American multi-decadal ensemble model, definitely has a warmer bias, but it's going to be pretty warm. I mean, we have been it's been good that we haven't had exceptionally high temperatures. Now, these mean temperatures is an average between the minimum and the maximum. So just to be clear on that. So based on that, we're still looking at this idea of warmer than normal temperatures, particularly from the plains to the west. You know, the west has already seen a lot of hot weather, and we expect that as we head into August that the high pressure will probably shift more back toward the west. This will allow for some bouts of cooler temperatures to kind of come down from Canada into the Corn Belt area. So you can see some of the less above normal shadings there, which certainly indicates that we would definitely see more changeable temperatures. So that would certainly be good because we know August is a key month. I think Jude already mentioned, particularly for soybeans. And also good news when we consider the precipitation chances. While things are looking pretty dry across Texas and the plains, further east with that idea that we're going to see more frequent storm chances into a good part of the Corn Belt and points to the south. So again, if this can be realized, which we're hopeful, we can definitely keep things well watered and get the soybeans through this particularly critical period. So now looking at September, we're kind of expanding the warmth a little bit further north and east up into the western Corn Belt. So again, this is the average of the minimum and the maximum. But again, there's that pocket of relatively cooler temperatures, temperature chances there in the heart of the Corn Belt, and that'll come with the potential for some increased moisture. I also expect that a lot of what you're seeing down there in the Florida area in terms of increased precipitation is due to potential tropical activity. September is the month with the highest climatological number of storms. So certainly expect that tropical storm moisture from tropical storms would be involved in this as well as we get closer to harvest. And then finally, looking at October, and now we should be into harvest area, we'll start to see some changes here as we start to move out of summer. You know, the seasonal summer high pressure starts to break down. It looks like it's going to retrograde out toward the southwest. We'll see more opportunities for some cooler temperatures to come down through the plains and into parts of the Corn Belt. A little bit warmer across parts of the east. I definitely think some tropical moisture would enhance that. But again, in terms of moisture, pretty close to typical. I would certainly expect to see some good moisture chances. You know, we'll actually be in a scenario where we hope to have enough dry periods in October to get the crops in. But at this point, we don't see any alarming trends as we look out toward harvest. Okay, so that kind of wraps things up for us. Again, what we're showing you here is part of a standard subscription offering that we provide our clients. Some of the components are a Monday morning report that we provide that focuses on last week, this week, next week weather. This is actually coincident with a 30-minute call with our clients to talk about the weather and insights and impacts to their business, and it's good network sharing opportunity. Seasonal outlook. So basically what we've shown you here is the typical type of content we show in our monthly seasonal outlooks. We focused here today on North America, but we also do the same type of thing for South America as well in the heart of their growing season. Jude already did a great job of talking about our greenness. We wrap those profiles and we provide some commentary around that information in our weekly green report, which basically comes to clients from March all the way through October. And then finally, Jude has showed you some snippets from the every 2-week crop yield forecast that we had, and again, corn, soybeans, but also 6 other summer crops as well. So that's it from us. And again, thank you very, very much. Jude, I want to thank you as well. Always great insights, and you've been just super partners of ours for a long time, and look forward to many years ahead with you. So again, what we've showed you here is basically the custom package, but there are other things that we do as well. So here at Planalytics, we actually provide some longer term tropical storm forecasting. We also provide more customized sales closing date outlooks that are custom to our clients. And then Jude, you folks at TerraMetrics doing some great stuff with county level yields. You want to talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I mentioned this at the tail end there, that we in 2 weeks will begin our county yield forecasting for corn and soybeans, which covers each, I forget what the number is exactly, but over 1,000 counties for each crop, I believe, across the country. And yeah, then we'll continue to update those values for the last half of the growing season. And I guess if anybody wants more information about that, just have to contact us. And yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all, and thanks to everyone who is tuned in.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jude, very much. And again, on behalf of Jude, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. Again, we have recorded this presentation, and we will give you the opportunity to make this available to you. Hopefully, you've had some questions to chat into the box. If you have, then we will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So again, thank you so very much, and have a great day.